Today's episode is about the habits that can create misery and our natural, innate psychology that drives us towards them. This episode will help you take a look at your life and actually see how perfect so much of it is, and help you stop looking for the next secret door that's going to lead you to your real life, or to help you stop waiting, because this life is it. It is your only life. There's nothing else. It's here right now, and you need to work out how to enjoy it, or you're going to be miserable wherever you go for the rest of your life forever. And so it's important to create all the happiness that you are able to create and remove all the misery that you are able to remove. Every day will allow you and invite you to add something to the pleasure of others or to diminish something of their pains. So hopefully today I can do just that for you and add an abundance of positivity into your life by helping you purge that negativity in yourself and for those around you. I am Sam Webster Harris, and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Okay, so today we are covering the 7 habits of highly miserable people and how to, in general, stop screwing yourself over. And we're going to jump right in with habit number 1, which is lying to ourselves. And I'm going to go deeper into an interesting form of lying to ourselves, which is a psychological argument called the Mott and Bailey argument style. And this creates the illusion of correctness for ourselves and gives us the feeling of general righteousness, but it's actually a way of blinding ourselves from reality. It's called the Mott and Bailey because it's based on a medieval type of defendable settlement. There was the common area for living in that was the motte, where most people spent their days. You could keep your cattle, have sizable homes, etc. And it's where you wanted to be. But it was a weaker area to defend, and so if you were ever under attack, you could retreat into the smaller but very well fortified bailey with large stone walls and places to shoot arrows out of, etc. So most people didn't live in the bailey apart from perhaps the lords of the town, etc. But everybody would retreat into the bailey in times of need. Now, the reason this argument style is called Mott and Bailey is it's an analogy for our own argument styles about things, the things that we do in our habits. We might have a habit or general belief that's a nice place to spend our time. Like the Mott, it's easy and convenient for us to spend our lives there, basically. But if we're ever challenged on this thing that we're doing, we find it very hard to defend, so we retreat from this specific belief that isn't very easy to defend into our bailey, which is a very similar belief, but very defendable. And this turns a weak argument into a strong argument, and conveniently forgets the fact that the argument isn't actually the same thing, and that the weakly argued habit or belief doesn't serve us, and we're arguing for the wrong things. So, for an extreme example, you might say something like, cats are amazing. I think that cats deserve free healthcare and just to be treated with complete human rights. And if your friend comes to you and says this is a bit of an extreme view, it's not very practical to create like complete human rights for all cats. We don't need to give cats the vote, etc. You might feel that your direct argument about cats getting human rights is a bit weak and go for a stronger argument like saying, you really hate cats. Only a cat hater would say that. As opposed to looking at the practicalities and weakness of your argument, you're now attacking them from a stronger position of them being a cat hater. Or for ourselves, it might be something like taking drugs, but calling that an act of self-care because we need to smoke that joint to relax. And for ourselves, it might be something very subtle, like procrastinating on something important and difficult to do, but calling it self-care because we need to take some time to look after ourselves. And, self-care is important. Self-care is mental health. So we need to, take this time to do this thing, even though it's actually not the urgent, important thing. And if we tried to argue that, cleaning the flat, having a shower, having a day chilling is more important than doing our really hard work, it doesn't sound very good. But if we say we need to do self-care and look after our mental health, it sounds much better. So that was my first example. But the whole concept of lying to ourselves comes up basically in all of the other bad habits that we can create. And being truthful to ourselves is an essential step to fixing any problem by building awareness of it. So on that, let's go on to habit number 2, which is procrastination, and also in general, waiting. So when it comes to procrastination, this habit is less about procrastination itself and more about honesty. As I just said in the last example from the Mott and Bailey style of arguing to ourselves, it can lead to lying to ourselves about procrastination if we have like some important decisions or some important work to do, and just avoiding getting on to this new project. When we say that something is self-care or just come up with like any other reasons to do something, we can just over-amplify the importance of the other reasons. We're just totally lying to ourselves about the importance of the actual decision or difficult thing that we have to do. But it is only by doing those things that scare us that we truly tackle the big things and create a better life, which is actually self-care. But in the moment, we'll accept the lie easily and quickly to allow ourselves to procrastinate and do other unimportant things. What we don't realize is that by using the easier label of self-care, we can actually be harming ourselves and eroding our own self-respect. We'll start believing that many things around us are perhaps too hard for us to take on, that we aren't capable or worthy of doing something better. We weaken ourselves and our self-beliefs. And because if we become weaker, we then need to practice even more self-care as we become increasingly fragile. And so you have to break out of this loop before it lets you end up wasting your life. And on the subject of wasting your life, the other bad habit in this section is waiting. And waiting for things is a really common lie that people have. We get a very naive idea of life that we accidentally just pick up from society, that so many things need to be perfect before we can do them. That love is a perfect thing that has to be completely wonderful for us to go into it, otherwise it's not worth doing. That maybe incredible people were actually born geniuses or were suddenly struck by a lightning bolt of inspiration that led them to do this genius work. And that can lead us to just wait for some incredible, brilliant thing to happen to us instead of doing the slow, dedicated work towards it. But if you look at romance, sadly, most brilliant romantic love, it takes time, and probably any partner that you find won't instantly be perfect on every level. So just waiting for some completely perfect person to drop out the sky that you won't need to do any work on yourself with to create a better relationship, that's a lie. And so you can't wait for perfect love. You have to work for it. In the same way with businesses, like most brilliant businesses weren't started in the form that we see them today. They iterated over many imperfect ideas to get to where they are. Twitter, which you may or may not think is a brilliant business anymore, was originally a podcast app before it became Twitter. Apple was two dudes building computers in their garage. If you wait for things to be completely perfect, whether it's a perfect idea or a perfect career or something, you're just not going to make any progress towards it. Instead, we need to start with something, gain experience in life, in our careers, being an entrepreneur, etc., and improve as we go along to build something that actually is then really good. And sure, it's true that we probably deserve something better than whatever it is that we could start doing right now, be that love or work, but it's ultimately a very convenient lie that blinds us from the work we need to do to build the life that we deserve. And it causes us to wait. And so many people have this sense of entitlement to something that's really, really good. And then they just seem surprised that they sort of accidentally seem to get older with nothing interesting happening in their life. And it's like, you just have to go and do it for yourself. And moving on to the third bad habit, which is victimhood and avoiding personal responsibility. Kind of related to the last habit, but in a different nuance, so we'll dive in. Lemony Snicket said that oftentimes when people are miserable, they will want to make other people miserable too, and it never helps them. And yes, negativity not only brings you down, but it also brings down those around you. When we constantly dwell on negative aspects of life, including perhaps our past mistakes, perceived injustices, or potential future problems, they can perpetuate a sense of victimhood and just hopelessness for ourselves. Negativity can overshadow any positive experiences and opportunities and will often lead you to missing out on the opportunities that they just seem to fall into the laps of other positive people. And it's not that these positive people get given more opportunities, it's that they see them positively and take them instead of seeing potential threats or negativity everywhere. And if you see lots of things to complain about everywhere and you can't list lots of positive things in your life, if you feel like often people are trying to make you see the more positive sides of life, then you are probably being overly negative. And it's like a hard truth to accept. There's no point lying to yourself about it. And you do need to start taking personal responsibility for that, which is that negativity tends to cause a lack of personal responsibility. When you habitually blame external factors or other people for your problems and your failures in life, by doing that, instead of taking personal responsibility and ownership of any situation, you actually make things worse for yourself. Yes, it's convenient for your ego to shift blame externally and maybe blame like how you were brought up, past traumas, or perhaps the culture where you live, or issues in the economy, or perhaps the lack of opportunities in your field of work. Those might all be issues and things that could be blamed, but it's not going to help you move forwards. When you blame everything around you, it means you give away control. You remove your ability to do something about your problems and say that they're all caused by something else that you can't control. And that means nothing changes. All those problems you have around you stay there. You can complain about them all you want, but they won't change and your life will still have the problems that you currently have. Not taking personal responsibility prevents you from learning how to deal with, prevents growth, and just leads to a feeling of powerlessness over one's life and won't get you anywhere. So, as Jocko Willink always says, just take complete ownership of everything and be responsible for your success instead of finding excuses that you can blame. And now on to habit number 4. That is money and our money story. As Daniel Kahneman said, that money does not buy you happiness, but a lack of money certainly buys you misery. And by not keeping yourself in control of money, it prevents you from doing what you want in life. It creates constant anxiety and cuts you off from a lifestyle that you want or opportunities that you would like to take. I dove quite deeply into some of the bad habits in money in my episode 14 Habits Keeping You Poor last year. But in general, just looking at a wider view of the money stories that we grow up with is perhaps one of the most important factors that drive the different habits that we have. If money became a source of arguments and conflict in your past, or your parents maybe weren't very good with money, it can be something that has a negative association for you. It can lead to people spending money to actually kind of get rid of it, because the concept of running out of money without them controlling it stresses them out more than if they control how to run out of money by spending it all, which sounds absurd, but it's a self-fulfilling problem that gives people a sense of control back, but obviously screws things over for them. Equally, the opposite problem can also be true. Some people can be so protective about money that they save so religiously that they actually never spend their money in a way that they can enjoy it, and they can't practically use that money to afford in their life any more luxurious choices, whether that means buying some nicer stuff or taking more holidays, looking after their mental health, for example, or perhaps even going into like a less well-paying career when they've achieved their sort of monetary success that they actually need, because they're so worried about constantly saving that they can't actually make that choice to work on something that they care about. That is also a disaster for your general overall life happiness. Another issue around money is that we can just take on the money story of those around us. So if we start making more money in a field where like everyone else is making money, let's say banking for the obvious example, but when there's lots of people around you making lots of money, you'll likely experience lifestyle inflation just to keep up with everybody else. That means buying the nice suit, getting a fancy car, going on expensive holidays, having a wonderful house, etc., all to kind of keep up appearances and to be able to hang out with everyone else and talk about the same sort of things. But that might not mean that you're using money for the things that you really want from life. It also means that you start having many outgoing bills. That means it's impossible for you to afford to get off the treadmill of your high-paying job and spending habit to keep that mortgage, to keep that payment on the car, to keep going on these fancy holidays, to afford that like fancy partner who also wants to spend all your money as well. And so it can actually put you into a hole which you can't then get out of. Overall, money is one of the most important and essential tools for our happiness, but it can also create misery when we work for money instead of making money work for us. So understand your money story, and getting yourself to a better place around money is a really huge thing to stop you from being miserable and enjoy your life more. Having just talked about the dangers of friends that make you spend money in ways you shouldn't be spending, number 5 is the opposite, which is being too isolated. Social interaction is a fundamental human need. Even if your friends are idiots, it's still better than nothing. It's crucial for mental and emotional well-being. Engaging with others provides support, a sense of belonging, and opportunities for personal growth and learning. When we lack social interaction, it just leads to feelings of loneliness, isolation, and significantly impacts our mental health and our physical health. Some of the mental health issues caused by this will be depression, anxiety, and stress, because we are just really social creatures. And when we do have a lack of interaction, it creates a weird sense of like emptiness and disconnectedness from society and just lack of purpose. When no one like is able to acknowledge what you've been up to in life, it just seems to kind of make everything a bit pointless. So mental health is one problem. Also, lack of interaction can lead to cognitive decline. This is especially more common in older people, and it's a really big accelerant of cognitive decline in the elderly. Regular interaction stimulates the brain, it keeps it engaged and active. It gives a purpose for actually remembering stuff about your life and using your brain. And when there's no social interaction, your brain starts to just switch off, just like the rest of your muscles degrade when they're not being used. So, if you have grandparents that are getting older, you should definitely pick up the phone more often and go and visit them as much as possible. But you should be aware that this also happens in younger generations, when if we do really shut ourselves off from society, we start to just become worse at things. We lose that social ability to communicate as important muscles that help us operate in society. And you just really don't want to do that. Like, COVID was great for a few months, but then like over a year, it wasn't so much fun. Another issue with isolation is reduced emotional support in general. Social interaction builds and maintains our support networks. It helps us get through our difficult times. And without this, it leads to an inability to effectively process and cope with emotional challenges. And that means we may fall on other bad habits to support ourselves. We don't have people around to positively encourage us, and we're just more likely to feel miserable in general. Some examples that contribute to creating more isolation is just the rise of working remotely. It's great in many ways, like I'm able to go and live in Portugal for a month, which is super cool, but like I don't have any friends where I'm living, and so I definitely don't have as much emotional support right now for this month. And many individuals actually sort of work full-time from their home, and their work interactions can be limited to emails and virtual meetings. And when things get very busy with family, they just start to lack in-person engagement with any other people, which can lead to feelings of professional and social isolation. Again, last year I actually found it really hard when I moved to Amsterdam because I do work entirely online, had no reason to meet anyone there, which did make it harder for me to build a social circle compared to when you're at university or you have a job where you meet people all the time. So you do have to go out of your way and like join different clubs, find a place to do co-working where you can actually start meeting people and build some friendship groups if you're going to be somewhere any longer than a month. Another area that causes isolation is just ignoring social interactions due to having anxiety or low mood. People who struggle with social anxiety or depression can often decline social invitations, and we think people are just busy, but they actually may be going into a cycle of isolation and just continuing these excuses to skip social gatherings. Over time, this leads them to start to be forgotten from their friend group, and it can exacerbate their own feelings of loneliness and reinforce their anxieties, creates a self-perpetuating cycle of isolation and just mental health challenges. So if you do see this starting in yourself or others, set some intentions to break this cycle or help someone else break that cycle and spend time in like a more protected way, and think about how you can build up to like bigger social interactions, because it isn't a good path to be walking down as it only gets worse. Lastly, another cause of isolation is just technology these days. Besides remote work, it just has become more of a substitute to real life interactions. Compared to meeting people in a bar, we use Tinder. Compared to like hanging out with your friends, you might just do things online. Excessive use of social media, video games, binge watching TV shows can just lead to our physical social interactions. And when those interactions do happen, we might not even be present because we're too busy in the virtual world. And it can be very alluring to transition into the ease of online communication and entertainment over face-to-face interactions, but it does lead to a lack of deep, meaningful relationships and a sense of loneliness. Even if you are very connected to others online, it isn't the same.
The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car-selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
And now this leads nicely into our next bad habit. That is social media. Yes, social media can be social sometimes, but as I just outlined, it can reduce connection in the moment, but it also causes many other problems. It does initiate comparison to others, which is just hard to avoid on social media. And in general, even outside of social media, comparison to others is just a really bad habit to create misery for yourself anyway, whether you're comparing in terms of success or possessions, lifestyle, romantic partners. All of these things can lead to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and just constant dissatisfaction and negativity with one's achievement and status. And that's just, of course, a bad habit. But on social media, that just amplifies it naturally, because in real life, we'll probably see very few people who are abundantly successful, absolutely killing it. But on social media, those are the people that you see the most, and you don't get a true version of reality. And also, even when you are looking at your friends, which you probably don't see as much on social media as you'd like to think, but you're only seeing the best parts of their lives. Like, sure, I posted a lot when I was in Nepal climbing mountains doing crazy stuff. When I'm having a boring day working, it turns out I don't post that much on social media. And conversely, for ourselves, we'll be putting up content that doesn't represent our own true reality of our life, which can create a sense of detachment from our life because we have this virtual image of ourselves that isn't real. Like I just said for myself, my life is a bit more mundane than all of the crazy stuff you can see on my social media, because by the nature of my life, I do actually have quite a lot of admin and boring crap that I get up to that social media doesn't see. And I don't feel like I'm quite such a cool, crazy adventurer as it might appear. Anyway, the other problem with social media is that it just wastes time. It's an instant fix in all of those moments that we are unsure what to do, and it can instantly occupy ourselves. It protects us from feeling bored, has this false illusion of productivity, but it means we avoid doing more meaningful stuff. Social media just fills all those little moments of life, spread out like these little confetti moments of our day. But succumbing to social media very regularly actively erodes our own brain's willpower to just sit still and focus on doing things or allowing ourselves to be bored. So having a habit where you let yourself go onto social media regularly throughout the day has many, many detrimental effects. And if you do want to use social media, you should really try and limit it to just once a day and remove a lot of the people who maybe are toxic or maybe are just sort of successful and don't give you a true representation of reality. I could, of course, rant much longer on the problems with social media, but we're going to move on to the final bad habit that will cause you lots of misery, and that's ignoring real self-care. When we consistently neglect the things that are important for our self-care and mental health, we, of course, create more misery for ourselves. Now, real self-care isn't actually super easy, like taking a nice bath or avoiding doing something difficult, and it's actually often the opposite. Neglecting our self-care will lead to things like poor eating habits, lack of exercise, inadequate sleep, and ignoring our mental health. That will all lead to a decline in physical and mental well-being, which of course impacts our overall happiness and life satisfaction. Doing harder things that actually make our life better will probably be harder in the moment to do. And when we have all these alluring ways that we can take an instant dopamine hit by using social media or even watching some like equivalent of intellectual junk food, but in the long term, we do have to look after ourselves. Remember that we are basically just an animal. If you had a dog, you would probably want to feed it good food. You'd want it to exercise correctly. You'd want it to get a good amount of sleep. And you have to do the same for yourself. It's a lie to say that you're giving yourself self-care by not bothering to do the hard work, ordering a takeout instead of cooking real food, not doing any exercise and instead sitting on a sofa. Like, that is not self-care. Another thing that I should definitely mention on the subject of lying to ourselves around self-care is drugs. It's easy to get into drugs because they can sometimes help us with things, and perhaps the first time you smoke weed, it sort of really relaxes you and it can help you deal with certain traumas and other problems in your life, and it can feel like you are doing self-care. But when you start to rely on it as a regular thing, it can be really bad. Sure, even if it gives you relief from things like social anxiety or creating detachment from your problems, disconnecting from your past, these seem really alluring, and when you start taking drugs, it can definitely feel like a net positive thing. But when you do rely on it, it does quickly turn into an overall net negative thing. However, we can maintain the lie that the drugs are good for us. In fact, it can feel really confusing because you'll feel like your life is difficult or getting worse, but you'll have learned that drugs were a good thing. You know that they helped you with these things, so you keep taking the drugs. But the problems are still there afterwards, and we just feel like more drugs must mean more happiness and less problems. Yet, of course, that's not what happens. Sure, we've been told by society that drugs are bad, but we feel like we've learned something different, like it's our secret that even though people say drugs are bad, we've discovered that they can be good. so everyone else is wrong and we'll just keep taking more. But yes, eventually you'll reach a point where it either gets so bad that you do finally have to stop and have a big self-realization moment, or you might find like a stasis point where you just sort of manage to take them every day and become like just a general addict. And it just sort of impacts the rest of your life and just keeps it quite negative. And you can stay in that place for years without really solving your bigger problems and thinking that you're doing something that kind of helps you to maintain the problem. And for many people, it's only when they finally do stop taking them for some reason that they feel like a whole weight has been lifted off their life and they can actually have the energy to start doing useful things and enjoying their real life again. Hopefully, if this relates to you at all currently, somehow you are able to work out that the drugs are a problem and maybe there are people around you that can support you, and you can slowly find less reasons to do drugs and start to recognize the benefits of not having them without going through some like serious moment of a potential trauma that eventually kicks you out of the habit. And basically it's just working out where we are lying to ourselves and realizing the true reality of things, as I started with the Mott and Bailey argument style of lying to ourselves. Often when we start taking drugs, we think it's self-care, but in reality, self-care is definitely quitting drugs. And if you do genuinely believe that you do need to take drugs for something, then it's really probably worth talking to a doctor about that problem and getting a prescription from a professional for a specific issue like depression or anxiety than taking illicit drugs in uncontrolled ways. Because in reality, everything about you knows that that's actually a more sensible decision, even though you kind of want to think that you're doing the right thing. So yeah, Uncle Sam on the anti-drugs parade here. Anyway, that was the 7 habits of highly miserable people. And sure, maybe I combined a few into like 2 habits at once, which is like a cheeky way to get more educational content into the episode. But you know, I like to give as much value as possible. And on that topic, I actually have a final bad habit and general solution for you. You may be very surprised by this, as this is the Growth Mindset podcast, but the final bad habit is something that is present in all of the other habits, and that is a fixed mindset and resistance to change. Because a fixed mindset is an overall encompassing bad habit that can affect us in all parts of life if we let it. And so that conveniently means for the podcast that a true growth mindset is the solution. To be more humble, to quieten our ego, and accept that we do need to work on ourselves to change. That is the solution in all areas of our bad habits. With a fixed mindset, we'll seek ways to lie to ourselves, we'll seek ways to blame others or to blame our situation, but in reality, taking control of what we can do to improve ourselves is, of course, the answer. When we are unwilling to adapt, it'll lead to stagnation, a sense of being left behind, and especially in a world where change is constant. This attitude will, of course, prevent our personal growth and our ability to have new experiences and opportunities. And sure, I understand that sometimes we want things to go perfectly. We might want to wait to make that decision of what we need to change in our lives, but there is no growth without change, so it's better to do something than nothing. And if you want to encourage more growth mindset thinking in your life, well, you can probably listen to the podcast for the rest of 2024, and that would be a great habit to channel for this year, whilst you make this year your best year yet. So thank you so much for listening to the show. Please listen to more episodes as I continue to release them, as I am becoming a full-time podcaster, and that would be appreciated. Of course, whilst I am panicking about trying to make it in society as a real podcaster as opposed to doing other things with my life, one thing I am concerned about is whether I get any ratings on the channel. So you can help me with my anxieties by smashing a 5-star review onto Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, and that would be delightful. Of course, if you do have any questions or feedback, you can email me at growthmindsetpodcast@gmail.com or slap a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and I do read all the comments. Anything constructive is wonderful. Any questions are great, or just showing some love and appreciation will very much make me happy. And finally, of course, life is now. We experience it in the present moment, and you do need to be happy now instead of miserable. So don't wait for a secret next door to open in your life that's going to lead you to like greater fulfillment, because there is nothing else. You are here now and you need to decide to enjoy your life now. Otherwise, as I said earlier, if you can't decide to enjoy your life, you are going to be miserable wherever you go for the rest of your life forever, which is very depressing and nobody needs to do that. And I certainly hope that you don't. So be kind to yourself today and every day, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.